Soulmates are sacred bonds that cannot be broken. That's what society teaches us from a young age. But when you're the one being publicly discarded, you learn that even profound connections mean nothing against a powerful man's pride. The breakup was supposed to be a private, quiet moment where Sophia would gracefully accept Daniel's decision and fade from his world. But Sophia had other plans. Standing in the center of the grand ballroom, surrounded by the city's most powerful and influential figures, she felt the connection to him searing through her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to submit, to bow her head and accept her fate quietly. Instead, she lifted her chin higher. "I, Sophia Reed, accept your rejection, Daniel Thorne," she declared, her voice carrying across the marble pillars with stunning clarity. "But I reject you in return." The gasps that followed were audible. In the history of their elite social circle, no one had ever dared to speak those words back to a man of Daniel's standing. But Sophia wasn't finished. 3 days earlier, the Reed family had been nothing more than a forgotten name from a small, struggling town, the kind of place where people scrape together an existence far from the gleaming skyscrapers and corporate empires of the city. Sophia had grown up knowing exactly what she was: the daughter of failed entrepreneurs, the granddaughter of outcasts, bearer of a bloodline so diluted she worked as a barista while others her age were inheriting fortunes. At 22, she'd never displayed any particular talent for business, had never moved in important circles, and had certainly never expected to catch the attention of anyone important, which made the arrival of the Thorne family's convoy all the more shocking. "They're here for the annual charity gala," her aunt, Clara, had whispered as they watched the procession of black luxury cars wind through their tiny town's main street. "Daniel Thorne himself is chairing the event this year." Sophia had watched from behind the cracked window of the local cafe as men and women in pristine suits emerged from vehicles that cost more than her entire family's annual income. At the center of it all, commanding attention without even trying, was Daniel Thorne. Even from a distance, Sophia could feel something stirring in her chest. A warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat and everything to do with the impossible recognition that whispered through her very soul. Him? She laughed at the absurdity of it. Sophia Reed, unremarkable in every possible way, feeling a pull to the most powerful CEO in the city? It had to be some kind of cosmic joke. But when Daniel's head had snapped in her direction across the town square, when those intense gray eyes had locked onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak, she'd known the connection was real, and from the way his expression had immediately shifted from recognition to disgust, she'd also known exactly what he thought about it. "A mistake," he'd heard him mutter to his assistant as they were introduced that evening at the pre-gala dinner. "This can't be right." Sophia had spent the next 2 days watching Daniel interact with her community, seeing the barely concealed contempt in his eyes. Every time he was forced to acknowledge her existence, she'd watched him charm the other single women, heiresses and executives with prestigious backgrounds who would make suitable partners for a man of his standing. She'd also watched the way he'd looked at her when she thought she wasn't paying attention. The hunger in his gaze when their eyes met, the way his hands would clench into fists when she was near, as if he was fighting the urge to reach for her. The connection was real, the attraction was undeniable, but his pride was stronger than both, which brought them to tonight. The formal gala where their connection, discovered during his visit, would be officially acknowledged or formally severed. Sophia had known what was coming. She'd seen it in Daniel's cold, professional demeanor all day. She'd felt it in the way he'd avoided looking at her directly, the way he'd positioned himself as far from her as possible during the pre-event cocktails. She'd come to the ballroom prepared to accept his rejection gracefully, to bow her head and fade away like a good little nobody should. But as she'd stood there watching Daniel announce his rejection in front of hundreds of witnesses, watching the smirks on the faces of the socialites who'd always known she didn't belong, something inside her had snapped. Not her heart, that had been breaking steadily for days. Her fear. For the first time in her life, Sophia Reed had stopped caring what people thought of her. And apparently, when you stopped caring about fitting in, you discovered you had a lot more power than anyone had ever given you credit for. The silence that followed Sophia's counter-rejection stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. The event's host, the elderly and immensely respected billionaire Arthur Pendleton, sat frozen in his seat of honor, his eyes wide with something that might have been shock or admiration. Daniel's face had gone completely blank, the kind of dangerous calm that preceded either complete submission or total annihilation.
"You," he started, his voice barely above a whisper, "you can't reject me back. That's not how this works." Sophia felt something wild and reckless unfurling in her chest. Maybe it was their connection finally snapping. Or maybe it was 22 years of being invisible finally reaching a breaking point. Either way, she found herself smiling. "Actually," she said, turning toward the event's legal consultant, a man seated near Mr. Pendleton, "according to the original bylaws of your own family's foundation, any acknowledged connection between two parties can be dissolved by either. The fact that most people choose not to reject back doesn't mean they can't." A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. Sophia could see several of the corporate lawyers frantically flipping through tablets, their expressions growing more surprised by the second. She's correct," stammered the head lawyer, a thin man named Robert, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "The reciprocal severance clause exists. It's just never been invoked because no one has ever been foolish enough to try," Daniel finished, his voice deadly quiet. But something had shifted in the room's energy. What had started as a humiliating public rejection was now something else entirely. A legal challenge that even Arthur Pendleton couldn't ignore. "Fascinating," Mr. Pendleton said slowly, leaning forward. His voice carried the weight of decades of built fortune. "Tell me, young lady, do you understand what you've just done?" Sophia's newfound courage flickered slightly under the old man's intense stare, but she forced herself to stand straighter. "I've rejected the man who rejected me, Mr. Pendleton. Nothing more, nothing less." "Nothing more?" Daniel stepped closer, and Sophia could feel the fury radiating off him in waves. "You've just challenged the natural order. Men like me don't get rejected by women like you." "You're right," I finished. "Men like you don't usually get rejected by anyone because most people are too afraid to use their own rights. But I'm not most people." The lie came so smoothly, she almost believed it herself. The truth is, she was terrified. Her heart was hammering so hard, she was sure everyone in the room could hear it. But she was also angry, angrier than she'd ever been in her life. And anger, she was discovering, was a hell of a lot more useful than fear. "This is unprecedented," Mr. Pendleton mused, and for the first time since entering the ballroom, he looked genuinely entertained. "Robert, what does the Foundation's charter say about reciprocal severance?" The head lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "According to the original texts, Mr. Pendleton, when both parties formally reject the connection, it creates what's called a severed status. Both parties are considered legally free to pursue other relationships with no obligation to their former partner." "Interesting." The old man's eyes gleamed with something that made Sophia's instincts prickle with warning. "And what about compensation?" "Compensation?" Sophia and Daniel spoke in unison. "Oh yes," Mr. Pendleton smiled, showing perfect white teeth. "The severed status requires compensation to be paid by the party who initiated the rejection sequence. Since Daniel spoke first, He let the implication hang in the air. The color drained from Daniel's face. Mr. Pendleton, surely you can't be serious. The Thorne corporate assets are considerable. Yes, the billionaire's smile widened, which makes this all the more intriguing. Tell me, Ms. Reed, are you familiar with the traditional compensation for a severed connection? My mouth went dry. I'd been running on pure adrenaline and righteous anger, but I hadn't thought beyond the moment of rejecting Daniel back. The idea that there might be legal consequences, consequences that benefited me, had never occurred to me. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with the specifics, sir. The rejected party is entitled to claim equivalent status compensation, meaning if a person of high standing rejects a partner and that partner reciprocally rejects, the rejected party gains the right to claim a business and financial standing equivalent to what they would have gained through the connection. The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers. I felt my knees go weak as the full implications hit me. You mean?
I mean, Mr. Pendleton said, his ancient eyes twinkling with mischief, that you, Sophia Reed, have just legally claimed the right to your own business empire. Congratulations, my dear. You've just gone from rejected partner to CEO in the span of a single conversation. The look of absolute horror on Daniel's face was almost worth the heart attack she was currently having. Almost. The celebration in Sophia's heart lasted exactly 14 seconds. That's how long it took for Daniel to recover from his shock and remember that he was a man who had never lost a battle, corporate or otherwise, in his entire life. Mr. Pendleton, Daniel said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. While I appreciate the educational value of this legal exercise, I think we're overlooking something important. Mr. Pendleton raised an eyebrow. Oh. The reciprocal severance law requires that both parties be of equal standing when the connection is acknowledged. Miss Reed may have been born in this town, but she's not actually a member of its business community anymore. Sophia's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? I mean, Daniel continued, pulling a document from his jacket with theatrical flair, that 3 hours ago, your aunt and guardian, Clara Reed, formally removed you from the family business and disinherited you for conduct unbecoming of family loyalty. The paper rustled as he unfolded it, and Sophia could see Clara's signature at the bottom, even from across the room. Her aunt's signature, authorizing her exile. The disinheritance was filed with the county clerk this afternoon with 2 witness signatures and a notary seal, which means, Daniel said triumphantly, that Miss Reed's attempted rejection holds no legal weight. She spoke as a person with no standing, and individuals with no standing cannot invoke severance law. The original rejection stands with no compensation required. Arthur Pendleton studied the document for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Sophia held her breath, hoping against hope that the old man might find some loophole, some technicality that could save her from this public destruction. Instead, he nodded slowly. The law is clear. Without standing, there can be no reciprocal severance. His eyes found Sophia across the room. I'm sorry, child. You played the game well, but you were outmaneuvered before it began. The defeat was crushing, but it was the betrayal that truly destroyed her. Sophia looked again at Clara, the woman who had found her as a 5-year-old orphan and promised to love her as her own daughter. The woman who had taught her to read, who'd bandaged her scraped knees, who'd held her through nightmares, and told her she was worthy of love. The woman who had thrown her to the wolves, literally, for a chance to curry favor with the most powerful man in the city. Why? Sophia asked, her voice breaking on the single word. Clara finally spoke, her words barely a whisper, but carrying clearly in the silent ballroom. He promised to protect the business. He said, if I helped him avoid the political complications of rejecting his connection, he would ensure our town remained secure. Our people would be safe. Our people, Sophia repeated hollowly, but not me. You were never really one of us, Clara said, and each word was a separate blade. Your background, your prospects, we all knew you'd never truly belong. This way, at least your sacrifice means something. At least the town survives.
The cruel mathematics of it was breathtaking. Trade one worthless family member for the protection of dozens of others. From a purely practical standpoint, it was the smart play. From a human standpoint, it was the kind of betrayal that shattered souls. Sophia felt something inside her chest crack and fall away. Not her heart, which had already been broken by Daniel's initial rejection, but something deeper. The part of her that had always believed that if she just tried hard enough, was good enough, quiet enough, she might eventually earn her place in the world. That part died, right there on the marble floor of the ballroom in front of hundreds of witnesses who were now looking at her with a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment. Well then, she said, her voice surprisingly steady for someone whose entire world had just collapsed, I suppose that settles it. She turned to face Daniel, who was watching her with something that might have been satisfaction or might have been regret. It was hard to tell, and Sophia found she no longer cared. Congratulations, Daniel, she said with a small bow. I hope it was worth the effort. She started toward the ballroom doors, planning to walk out with whatever dignity she could salvage, but Arthur Pendleton's voice stopped her before she'd taken 3 steps. Miss Reed, the billionaire called, his voice carrying an odd note of anticipation. Before you go, there's something else you should know. Sophia turned back, too emotionally exhausted to feel hope or fear. The old man smiled, and this time there was something predatory in the expression. You may not be able to invoke reciprocal severance rights as a person with no standing, but there is one other legal avenue available to you. Sir? Robert looked confused. The right of challenge, Mr. Pendleton said simply. A single business challenge. No outside help, no mercy. The challenged party chooses the nature of the contest, but it must take place within 7 days of the challenge being issued. Winner takes all. He leaned forward, and for the first time all evening, he looked genuinely interested in the outcome. The question is, do you have the courage to issue such a challenge, or will you walk away and live with the knowledge that you let them destroy you without a fight? The ballroom held its breath. Even Clara had stopped crying, watching Sophia with wide, horrified eyes. Daniel, for his part, looked like a man watching a mouse decide to attack a cat, confident in the outcome but surprised by the potential audacity. Sophia looked around the room at all the faces watching her, powerful men and women who had never known hunger or rejection, people who had been born into their strength, officials who served at the pleasure of billionaires and never had to wonder if they'd have a home tomorrow. None of them understood what it was like to have nothing left to lose. But Sophia was about to show them. I, Sophia Reed, invoke the right of challenge against Daniel Thorne. The words left her mouth before her rational mind could stop them. They hung in the air like a death sentence, which, professionally speaking, they probably were. The silence that followed Sophia's challenge was immediate and explosive. Half the ballroom gasped in shock, while the other half burst into excited whispers. Someone in the back actually started laughing, a high, disbelieving sound that cut through the chaos like a blade. Daniel stared at her as if she'd just sprouted a second head. You can't be serious. Dead serious, Sophia replied, surprised by how calm she sounded. Inside,
Her mind was racing frantically, screaming about the insanity of challenging a corporate titan who could probably bankrupt a small country with one phone call. But the human part of her, the part that was tired of being small and scared and forgettable, felt oddly peaceful.
"This is madness," Clara whispered from her spot near the back wall. "Sophia, please, just walk away. You've made your point." "Have I?" Sophia turned to face her former guardian, her former mother, her former everything. "What point would that be, Clara? That I'm exactly as weak and worthless as everyone always believed? That you were right to trade me away like damaged livestock?" "That's exactly what you meant." Sophia's voice carried a strength she didn't know she possessed. "You meant that I was expendable, that my life, my happiness, my future, none of it mattered as much as your political convenience." She turned back to Arthur Pendleton. "Your Honor, I formally request that you witness my challenge." "Witnessed and accepted," the billionaire replied immediately, clearly having the time of his life. "Mr. Thorne, you are legally bound to respond. Will you accept the challenge?" Daniel looked around the room as if hoping someone would explain how his perfectly orchestrated evening had gone so completely sideways. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca, was making frantic abort mission gestures from the sidelines. "She's a person with no business training. She's never even managed a budget. This isn't a challenge. It's assisted suicide." "Nevertheless," Mr. Pendleton said cheerfully, "the rules are the rules. You must either accept the challenge or formally acknowledge her as your superior and grant her the compensation she originally claimed." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia could practically see the wheels turning in Daniel's head as he weighed his options. Accept the challenge and risk looking like a bully who crushed helpless women for sport, or back down and lose face in front of the entire city's elite. "Fine," he said eventually, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I accept, but I choose the terms of the contest." "Of course you do," Sophia muttered. 7 days from tonight, in the main conference hall of the Pendleton Tower, we will each be given a failing business from my portfolio. Whoever can present the most viable turnaround plan in that time, as judged by a panel of Mr. Pendleton's choosing, wins. Agreed?" "Agreed." The word came out steadier than Sophia felt. "Then it is settled," Arthur Pendleton announced, clapping his hands together with evident satisfaction. "Let the record show that Sophia Reed has invoked the right of challenge against Daniel Thorne, with the contest to take place in 7 days' time. Until then, both parties are under the Foundation's protection and may not be interfered with by any other party." He stood, a clear signal that the evening's entertainment had concluded. "This gala is dismissed. I do so look forward to next week's festivities." As the assembled elite began filing out, chattering excitedly about the unprecedented drama they had just witnessed, Sophia found herself standing alone in the center of the marble floor, beginning to realize the full scope of what she had just committed herself to. 7 days to prepare for a contest against one of the most powerful businessmen in the city. 7 days to somehow become savvy enough to compete with a man who had been training for corporate warfare since childhood. 7 days to figure out how to avoid professional annihilation in front of hundreds of spectators. 7 days to live. "Sophia?" Clara's voice was small and broken as she approached. "What have you done?" "What I should have done years ago. I stopped letting other people decide what I was worth." "He's going to destroy you." "Probably." Sophia finally faced the woman who had raised her. "But at least I'll be destroyed as myself, instead of living as whatever convenient fiction you and Daniel needed me to be." Clara's face crumbled. "I never wanted this. I thought
I thought if you just accepted the rejection quietly, you could start over somewhere else. Find a small town that would take you in. Maybe find happiness with someone more suitable." "More suitable?" Sophia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Meaning weaker? Someone who wouldn't make me dream above my station?" "I meant someone who could love you without destroying you," Clara whispered. For a moment, Sophia's anger wavered. She could see the genuine pain in her eyes, the regret that came too late to change anything. Part of her, the part that had been a daughter for 17 years, wanted to forgive, to understand, to find some way to salvage something from the wreckage of their relationship. But then she remembered standing in the same ballroom 20 minutes ago, hearing Clara confirm her disinheritance without even trying to defend her. Remembered the careful planning that had gone into ensuring Sophia's humiliation was as complete as possible. "If you had loved me," Sophia said quietly, "you would never have signed that document. Love doesn't come with political calculations, Clara. What you felt for me was convenient affection at best." She turned and walked toward the ballroom doors, where a member of Mr. Pendleton's security team was waiting to escort her to whatever accommodations had been prepared for condemned challengers. "Sophia, wait." Clara's voice was desperate now. "Where will you go? How will you prepare? You can't face him alone." Sophia paused at the threshold, her hand on the massive wooden door. "I've been alone my whole life," she said without looking back. "I just finally stopped pretending otherwise." The doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder, cutting off Clara's reply and sealing Sophia's fate. The head of security, a grizzled man named Commander Harris, was waiting in the corridor with an expression that mixed professional courtesy with genuine sympathy. "Miss Reed," he said formally, "Mr. Pendleton has arranged a suite for you in the corporate annex. You'll have access to research facilities and a modest business library. Is there anything specific you require for your preparation?" Sophia almost laughed at the careful euphemism. Preparation? As if 7 days of study could somehow level the playing field between her and a CEO who had been bred for dominance. "Actually," she said, surprising herself, "there is something. I need to know everything you have about Daniel Thorne's business strategies, his failed ventures, his weaknesses, his preferred tactics, anything that might give me even the smallest advantage." The commander's weathered face split into the first genuine smile she'd seen all evening. "Now that," he said, "sounds like the attitude of someone who might actually make this interesting." "Of course." Here is the continuation of the story. The corporate annex was a world away from the small-town life Sophia had always known. Her suite was all cool minimalism and glass, overlooking the city's glittering skyline. The silence was profound, broken only by the hum of a supercomputer in the corner and the distant wail of sirens far below. It felt less like a sanctuary and more like a very beautiful cage. For 3 days, Sophia existed in a strange state of suspension. During the day, she was tutored by a rotating cast of consultants, crisp, efficient people who'd tried to teach her the fundamentals of corporate finance, market analysis, and strategic planning. The information felt like trying to drink from a fire hose. During the long evenings, she pored over case studies of Daniel's business dealings, trying to find a pattern, a weakness, anything. On the third night, a quiet knock interrupted her studying. She opened the door to find a woman about her own age with an ethereal beauty that spoke of old money and careful breeding. Her golden hair was perfectly styled, and her eyes were the color of sea glass. "Miss Reed," she said hesitantly, "my name is Isabella Sterling. I was the woman my family intended for Daniel to marry before you complicated things." Sophia blinked in surprise. She heard whispers of Isabella Sterling, daughter of a rival corporate dynasty, the kind of perfect politically advantaged match powerful families arranged for their heirs. "I'm sorry," Sophia said automatically, then caught herself. "Actually, no, I'm not sorry. You're better off without him." Isabella's laugh was bitter. "That's what I came to tell you, actually. You're not the first connection he's severed." She stepped into the room uninvited, her nervous energy filling the sterile space. "May I? This is complicated." Sophia gestured to a sleek chair, settling on the edge of the bed. "Complicated how?" "Oh, no. He was perfectly willing to go through with it until a few months ago, when he met his true connection during a merger negotiation. Isabella's expression darkened. A brilliant junior partner from a southern firm named Chloe Ravenswood. The connection was immediate, powerful, undeniable. Sophia felt something cold settle in her stomach. What happened to her? The same thing that almost happened to you, except she wasn't brave enough to fight back. Isabella's voice was flat with suppressed anger. He severed ties with her publicly, claimed she wasn't suitable for a man of his standing. She accepted it quietly like a good little society girl and transferred to an office overseas. And then he found me. And then he found you. Isabella met Sophia's eyes directly. Do you want to know the real reason he rejected you so viciously? It wasn't because you weren't good enough. It was because you were too good. The connection between you two was stronger than anything he'd ever experienced, stronger even than what he felt for Chloe. And that terrified him.
The room fell silent as Sophia processed this. Everything she'd assumed about Daniel's motivations, about her own unworthiness, suddenly looked different through this lens. He's afraid of genuine connection, she said slowly. He's afraid of losing control, Isabella corrected. Daniel has spent his entire life being told he's destined for greatness, that he'll unite corporate interests through strategic alliances and careful political maneuvering. The idea of being genuinely vulnerable to someone, of needing them in ways he can't control or manipulate, it goes against everything he thinks he is. Sophia stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city where she would either be destroyed or triumph in less than 4 days. Why are you telling me this? Because I've spent the last 3 days watching the corporate fallout from your challenge, Isabella said. The other executives are nervous. Not about the contest itself. Everyone assumes Daniel will win easily. They're nervous about what happens after. After? Think about it. You've just demonstrated that people who are cast aside have more legal rights than anyone realized. You've shown that the old charter rules can be invoked by anyone brave enough to use them. Word is already spreading to other firms, other boards. There's talk of other people coming forward, of challenges being issued against executives who thought they were untouchable. Isabella's voice grew more intense. You've lit a fuse that's been waiting to explode for decades, and I think the established power structure is about to do everything they can to snuff it out before it spreads. She stood and moved toward the door, then paused. There's something else you should know. Daniel isn't planning to play fair. Sophia's blood chilled. What do you mean? I mean, he's been meeting with a consultant named Victor Croft, someone who specializes in enhancing executive performance for high-stakes negotiations. It's technically not illegal, since the methods are derived from advanced neurostimulants and data analytics, but it's definitely not sporting. So he gets to be supernaturally sharp, and I get to be naturally annihilated? Unless you find your own advantages. Isabella reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small leather-bound journal. This belonged to Chloe Ravenswood. She left it behind when she transferred. I thought you might find it useful. Sophia took the journal, feeling the weight of secrets in its worn leather binding. What's in it? Everything she learned about Daniel during their brief time together. His negotiation style, his blind spots, his fears. Isabella smiled grimly. Turns out rejected partners make very thorough intelligence gatherers. After she left, Sophia sat on the bed with Chloe's journal in her lap, afraid to open it. Part of her didn't want to know Daniel's secrets. It was easier to hate a monster when he remained a mystery. But easier wasn't going to keep her from professional oblivion. She opened the journal and began to read. Day 1. Met my match today, Daniel Thorne of Thorne Industries. The connection hit like lightning.
I've never felt anything so intense. He seemed equally affected, but there was something in his eyes. Fear? Why would a man like that fear his own heart? Day 3. Daniel keeps avoiding being alone with me. When we are together, he's charming but distant, like he's playing a role instead of being himself. I catch him watching me sometimes, and the hunger in his gaze is undeniable. But then he looks away and becomes cold again. Day 7. I think I understand now. He's not afraid of me. He's afraid of how much he wants me, afraid of how the connection makes him feel out of control. He told me tonight that leaders can't afford to show weakness, can't afford to need anyone more than they are needed.
Day 12. He's going to end it. I can see it in the way he's pulling back, the way he talks about political necessities and appropriate matches. Part of me wants to fight for what we have, but I'm tired of begging for scraps of affection from someone who sees love as a liability. Sophia closed the journal, her hand shaking slightly. She'd expected tactical information about business strategies. Instead, she'd found something much more dangerous. Understanding. Daniel wasn't just a cruel executive who enjoyed destroying lesser rivals. He was a man so terrified of vulnerability that he'd rather destroy his own happiness than risk being genuinely known by someone. The question was, would that knowledge help her survive the contest, or would it get her destroyed by making her hesitate at a crucial moment? The knock on her door the next evening was not from a consultant or a messenger. It was Commander Harris, his expression unusually grave. "Miss Reed," he said formally, "you have a visitor. She insists it's urgent." He stepped aside to reveal an ancient woman, her back stray as a rod, her silver hair coiled in an elegant chinion. She moved into the room with an authority that made the very air seem to still. Her eyes, sharp and impossibly knowing, scanned the suite before settling on Sophia. "My name is Eleanor Vance," the woman said, her voice carrying the weight of countless boardroom battles. "I was your grandmother's most trusted advisor, and, for a time, I was Arthur Pendleton's." Sophia scrambled to her feet. "Miss Vance, I know who you are." The woman was a legend. The silent partner, they called her. The strategist behind 3 of the largest corporate mergers in history. Good. That saves time. Eleanor Vance settled into the chair, her gaze fixed on Sophia. "In 3 days, you are going to be professionally dismantled, unless something changes dramatically. We don't have time for pleasantries. I've come to make you an offer, one that could save you if you're brave enough to accept it." Her heart began to race. What kind of offer? "The kind your grandmother would have understood." Eleanor's eyes glittered. "Tell me, child, what do you know about your bloodline? Your real bloodline? Not the watered-down story Clara told you about failed entrepreneurs and forgotten outcasts." Sophia sat back down hard on the bed. "I don't know anything about my real bloodline. Clara found me when I was 5. I don't remember anything from before then." "Of course you don't. The legal guardianship and name change were part of the protection plan." Eleanor leaned forward, studying Sophia's face with uncomfortable intensity. "Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual? Sudden insights? A knack for seeing patterns others miss?" Her mouth went dry. "How did you—" "Because I orchestrated the original guardianship 20 years ago at the request of a dying woman who wanted to protect her granddaughter from rivals who would destroy her for her name." Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "Your real name isn't Sophia Reed, child. It's Sophia Rutherford, last surviving heir of the Rutherford legacy." The room spun. Rutherford. The name was a ghost, a whisper from business history books. A family known for revolutionary ideas and brutal, unsolved corporate takeovers that had led to their downfall. The Rutherford legacy.
But that's extinct. Everyone knows the Rutherford Empire was dissolved after the scandals. Everyone knows what we wanted them to know, Eleanor corrected. Your grandmother, Genevieve Rutherford, was the most visionary CEO of her generation. She could see market trends years before anyone else, could build alliances that reshaped entire industries, could command a room with a power that made the earth itself tremble. She was also smart enough to know that vision like that makes you a target. She was killed for it. She died protecting you, along with the rest of your family. When the coalition of rival executives decided the Rutherford influence had become too powerful to allow to continue, you were 5 years old, the sole survivor, hidden away with a new identity that would suppress your inheritance until you were old enough to claim it safely. Sophia felt like she was drowning. You're saying I'm some kind of secret business heiress? I'm saying you're the genetic descendant of one of the most powerful business minds in recorded history, and that your innate talents have been artificially suppressed for 20 decades.
Eleanor stood and moved to the window, staring out at the city. I'm also saying those protections are starting to crack, and in 3 days, you're going to need every advantage you can get. But if I'm so capable, why haven't I felt it? Why am I still just me? Because talent without training is just dangerous potential. Eleanor turned back to face her. Which brings me to my offer. I can remove the legal and psychological blocks tonight. I can give you access to your full heritage, your complete abilities, everything your bloodline should have granted you from birth. What's the catch? Eleanor smiled, a sharp, predatory expression. Smart girl. The catch is that 20 years of suppressed potential, released all at once, will either forge you into something extraordinary, or it will break you. There's no middle ground. You either survive the transition and become what you were born to be, or you are psychologically shattered in the process. And if I don't take the offer? Then you face Daniel Thorne with the abilities of an average person with no formal training, and you are professionally destroyed in approximately 5 minutes after the contest begins. The choice, when laid out like that, didn't feel like a choice at all. What would I become? Sophia asked. If I survived, what exactly would I be? Eleanor's expression grew distant. You would become what your great-grandmother was before the other executives grew too frightened to let her lead. A true visionary, a person who can see through market noise to the truth underneath, who can build loyalty that transcends business, who can work the old magic of human connection that shaped commerce before it became just numbers on a screen. She paused, meeting Sophia's eyes directly. You would become powerful enough that Daniel Thorne would have no choice but to acknowledge your superiority. The image was intoxicating. Sophia could almost see it. Daniel's face when he realized what she truly was. Clara's horror when she understood what she'd thrown away. But she could also imagine her mind fracturing under the pressure, becoming a ghost of who she once was. How long do I have to decide? The reorientation must be completed tomorrow night. That gives you 24 hours to choose. Continue as you are and be destroyed as a forgotten nobody, or risk everything for the chance to reclaim your birthright. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, child. If you choose this path and survive, there will be no going back. You cannot pretend to be small and harmless once you've shown the world what you truly are. You will spend the rest of your life as either a leader or a target. And if I'm both? Eleanor's smile was sharp as broken glass. Then the business world is about to become a much more interesting place.
The night before the challenge, Sophia stood in the center of her suite,
the city lights a sprawling tapestry of gold below her. Eleanor Vance stood before her, having transformed the sterile room into a space that felt more like a war room than a corporate apartment. Whiteboards covered in complex market diagrams and psychological profiles had replaced the abstract art. "It's time," Eleanor said, her voice devoid of its usual sharpness, replaced by a solemn gravity. "Are you ready to discover what you truly are?" Sophia took a deep breath, the air itself feeling charged. "I'm ready." The process was not a ritual of magic, but one of intense, accelerated psychological and strategic unlocking. It was a brutal, non-linear torrent of information and reframing. Eleanor didn't use a knife, but a series of targeted questions, historical case studies from her own family's past, and cognitive exercises designed to shatter the mental blocks Clara's upbringing had imposed. The first stage was the unlearning. Sophia's scream was silent, internal, as 20 years of being told she was less than were systematically dismantled. Memories, true memories, flooded back with painful clarity. A woman with fierce eyes and silver-streaked hair, Genevieve, holding her up to a complex stock ticker. "See the pattern, little star? It's not numbers, it's a story. Learn to read it." The sound of shouting, the smash of glass in a grand office, her grandmother shoving her into a hidden elevator, her voice frantic. "Run, Sophia, hide! Don't let them know who you are until you're strong enough." Clara, finding her crying at a bus station days later, her face a mask of pity and fear. "I'll keep you safe, child, but you must forget the name Rutherford. It's a dangerous thing to be." The memories came faster, a dam breaking. She remembered her birthright, not of money but of acumen, a ruthless, innate understanding of systems, people, and power. "Stage 1 is complete," Eleanor announced, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. "The psychological barriers are down. Can you hear me, child?" Sophia tried to answer, but her mind was a whirlwind of reassembling pieces. The pain was a mental agony, the death of the person she thought she was. But underneath it, she could feel something else building, a cold, sharp clarity that made the world seem to snap into hyper-focused detail. "Stage 2 begins now," Eleanor warned. "Try not to fight what's coming." This was the integration of her heritage. It wasn't about becoming someone else, it was about becoming the fullest, most potent version of herself. Her mind, previously capable but untrained, began processing information at an astonishing rate. She looked at the whiteboards and didn't just see business plans, she saw the underlying psychological motivations, the potential leverage points, the cascading effects of every decision. And then came the third stage, the expansion of awareness. As her consciousness settled into its new parameters, Sophia's perceptions seemed to stretch beyond the room. She could feel the corporate ecosystem of the city. She could sense the anxious energy of Pendleton Tower being prepared for the next day's event. She could feel the ambitions and fears of the dozens of executives already jockeying for position. It was what she sensed from Arthur Pendleton's private penthouse that chilled her newfound clarity. He wasn't alone. He was meeting with 3 other titans of industry, men whose companies bordered Thorne Industries' most valuable assets. "We cannot allow a Rutherford to regain a foothold," a voice she recognized as Alpha Marcus Ironwood was saying, his words crystal clear in her mind. If she defeats Thorne, she'll have a legal claim to his resources. If she's humiliated, she becomes a martyr. Either outcome is unacceptable. "The girl must be discredited," another voice, Vincent Shadow, agreed. "Thorne's victory must be so absolute that no one would ever dare to follow her example." "I have people on the judging panel," a third, David Stormclaw, added.
The metrics for the turnaround plan can be shifted at the last moment to favor Thorne's pre-established strengths. Arthur Pendleton's ancient voice was thoughtful. And if she proves more resilient than expected, if the Rutherford genius is truly awakened, then we activate the contingency plan, Ironwood said grimly. A leaked, forged document to the press, painting her as a fraud who manipulated data. The court of public opinion will destroy her long before any legal victory can be finalized. Sophia's expanded consciousness reeled. The challenge itself was a sham. They'd never intended to let her win or even to let her have a fair fight. She was a virus in their system to be quarantined and eliminated. They fear us because they know what we could become, a new, steady voice within her stated. They remember what grandmother could do. But there was more. She focused her attention on Daniel's penthouse. He was there with Clara, and with the consultant, Victor Croft. The neuro-enhancement regimen is complete. His recall, processing speed, and strategic aggression are at their peak. He'll be operating on a level she can't possibly comprehend. And the side effects? Clara's voice was thick with tears. Temporary. Hyper-competitiveness, reduced empathy, and a certain moral flexibility. But they fade. The important thing is that the natural order is preserved. You've turned him into a weapon, Clara whispered. I've ensured your town's survival, Daniel's voice cut in. Different, colder, harder, devoid of the conflicted humanity she'd glimpsed before. The Rutherford line ends tomorrow, permanently. Sophia pulled her awareness back into the room, her body trembling not with fear, but with a cold, purifying fury. They had planned her destruction down to the last detail. Eleanor was watching her, her face pale. Sophia, focus, you were drifting. What did you see? They're not going to let me win, Sophia said, her voice now carrying a new, unshakable authority. The judging is rigged. Daniel is chemically enhanced, and if by some miracle I overcome all that, they'll destroy me with a smear campaign.
Eleanor's expression grew dark. I feared as much. The political implications of your survival are too significant. So what do? I can't run, I can't hide, and I can't fight them all on a rigged battlefield. There is one option, Eleanor said, her eyes gleaming with a revolutionary's fire. But it's the riskiest of all. We don't wait for their rigged game. We act tonight while they think you're still unprepared. We remind the corporate world why the name Rutherford was feared. What did you have in mind? Sophia asked, her newfound instincts humming with anticipation. Not a battle, Eleanor said. A demonstration. We give them a performance so stunning, so undeniable, that rigging the contest tomorrow becomes impossible without exposing their own corruption. It's time to show them what happens when they underestimate a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The main conference hall of Pendleton Tower was silent, save for the whisper of expensive fabric and the soft click of tablets powering on. Hundreds of the city's elite were packed into the tiered seating, their faces a mixture of boredom and bloodthirsty anticipation. They were here for an execution, not a contest. On the raised dais, Arthur Pendleton sat flanked by the three judging panelists, Ironwood, Shadow, and Stormclaw. Daniel Thorne stood at his podium, looking impeccable and unnaturally focused, his gaze a laser. He was the picture of corporate perfection. Sophia stood at her own podium. She looked different, not in her clothing, which was simple and professional, but in her bearing. The nervous girl from the ballroom was gone. In her place was a woman whose calm demeanor radiated an unnerving authority. She caught Eleanor's eye from the front row and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur Pendleton began, his amplified voice echoing, "we're here to witness the resolution of a challenge. Each contestant has been given 72 hours to analyze the same failing enterprise, a chain of boutique hotels called the Oasis, and devise a complete turnaround strategy. They will now present their findings.
Mr. Thorne, you may begin. Daniel launched into his presentation. It was a masterclass in conventional corporate strategy, streamlining operations, aggressive rebranding, targeted layoffs, and a digital marketing blitz. It was cold, efficient, and mathematically sound. The judges nodded along, clearly impressed. It was exactly what they expected, what they respected. He finished to respectful, knowing applause. The outcome seemed inevitable. Then it was Sophia's turn. She didn't approach the podium. She simply stood and looked out at the audience, her gaze sweeping over the judges, over Daniel, over Arthur Pendleton. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and carrying without amplification, "you've just heard a plan to save a business. I am here to present a plan to build an empire." A ripple of surprised murmuring went through the crowd. She picked up a remote, and the massive screen behind her lit up not with bullet points, but with a complex, interactive model. "Mr. Thorne's plan is to cut the dead weight. My plan is to understand why the weight is dead. The Oasis isn't failing because of operational inefficiency. It's failing because it has no soul." For the next 20 minutes, Sophia didn't just present a business plan, she performed a psychological autopsy of the company and its market. She wove together data points the consultants had missed, local economic trends, sociological shifts in travel, the emerging experience economy. She didn't propose layoffs. She proposed a radical reinvestment in staff, transforming them from service workers into experience curators. She didn't suggest a rebrand. She designed a new community-integrated model where the hotels became cultural hubs for their neighborhoods. She spoke without notes, her words flowing with a visionary's passion and a strategist's precision. She referenced historical business case studies, some so obscure that the judges had to lean forward to catch them. She was not just solving a problem, she was painting a future, and it was so vivid, so compelling, that the room fell into a stunned silence. She was channeling Genevieve Rutherford. She finished by looking directly at the judging panel. "You can choose the safe, sterile path that leads to modest, predictable returns, or you can choose to build something that people will love, that will become a part of the cultural fabric, and in doing so, will generate wealth that dwarfs any spreadsheet projection. The choice is yours." For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then the room erupted, not in the polite applause given to Daniel, but in genuine, excited conversation. She had not just met the challenge, she had redefined it. The judges looked horrified. This was not in the script. Daniel's face was a mask of cold fury, his enhanced mind realizing that raw data had just been outmaneuvered by genius. Arthur Pendleton stood, holding up a hand for silence. The room stilled.
"A remarkable presentation, Miss Reed," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "The judges will now confer." The four men huddled, their whispers heated. Sophia could see Ironwood gesturing sharply, no doubt pushing for the prearranged outcome. But Pendleton looked troubled. He had seen something real, something that couldn't be easily dismissed without exposing his own hand. After several tense minutes, they returned to their seats. Pendleton cleared his throat. "This was an unprecedented challenge," he began. "Both plans have considerable merit in their own right. However, after careful deliberation, the panel has determined that the quantitative projections in Mr. Thorne's plan present a more certain return on investment. Therefore, the victory is awarded to— Forgive me, Mr. Pendleton." Sophia's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. All heads turned to her. The terms of the challenge were not merely the certainty of return. They were for the most viable turnaround plan. Viability is not just about short-term numbers. It's about long-term sustainability, brand loyalty, and market disruption. My plan, by every non-rigged metric, is superior. You know it. Everyone in this room knows it. The air left the room. She had openly called out the corruption. "This is highly irregular," sputtered Judge Ironwood. "What is highly irregular
is that you would sanction the chemical enhancement of one contestant while planning to smear the other should she defy your expectations. What is highly irregular is a system so terrified of new ideas that it would rather cheat than adapt. She turned to face the audience, her voice rising, filled with the power of her reclaimed name. My name is not Sophia Reed. It is Sophia Rutherford. My grandmother built empires from nothing, and you destroyed her for it. You tried to erase us, but you failed. She looked back at the dais. I am not here to play your rigged game. I am here to claim what is legally mine, and in doing so, I am here to offer a choice. She walked to the center of the stage, a lone figure against the powerful. Honor your own laws, Mr. Pendleton. Award me the victory and the compensation I am owed. Or admit here, in front of everyone, that your world is built on sand, that justice is a commodity you sell to the highest bidder. The silence was absolute. The entire power structure of the city hung in the balance. Arthur Pendleton, the ancient king of this world, studied the young woman who had just checkmated him. To deny her now would be to ignite a fire he might not be able to control. The story was already spreading. He could feel it in the electrified air of the room. He looked at Daniel, whose enhanced aggression seemed to have frozen into stunned humiliation. He looked at his fellow judges, who looked away, unwilling to meet his gaze. He looked back at Sophia, and in her eyes he saw not the desperate hunger for power he was used to, but the cool certainty of it. A slow smile spread across his ancient face. It was not a kind smile. It was a smile of a man who respected a masterstroke. The challenge, Arthur Pendleton announced, his voice resonating with finality, is awarded to Sophia Rutherford. The uproar was instantaneous. It was the sound of a world shifting on its axis.
3 months later, the Rutherford Trust was no longer just a legal entity. It was a burgeoning reality. Sophia had taken her compensation not as a lump sum, but as controlling shares in the faltering Oasis chain and several other small, mismanaged businesses from Daniel's portfolio. Just as she had promised in her presentation, she didn't just save them, she transformed them. The first Oasis Hotel, now renamed The Hearth, had become a model for community-focused business, its profits soaring as it became a beloved local institution. Rejected executives, visionary misfits, and ethical entrepreneurs who'd been sidelined by the old guard were finding a home and funding within her growing network. She stood in her new sunlit office overlooking a city that was slowly, grudgingly, coming to respect her. The door opened, and Eleanor Vance entered, a proud smile on her face. "You've done it, child. You've built your own table, rather than begging for a seat at theirs." "It's a start," Sophia said, turning from the window. "The smear campaign Pendleton threatened never materialized." "Of course not," Eleanor replied. "He's a survivor. He saw which way the wind was blowing. It's more valuable to have a Rutherford as a reluctant ally than a glorious martyr." There was a soft knock. Clara stood there, looking older and frailer than Sophia remembered. "May I come in?" she asked softly. Sophia nodded. Eleanor discreetly excused herself. Clara didn't speak for a long moment, just looked at the woman Sophia had become. "I saw the feature in the business journal," she finally said. "What you're building, it's remarkable." "It's necessary," Sophia replied, her voice even. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet resolve. "I was wrong, Sophia. So terribly wrong. I thought I was protecting you by making you small. I thought I was saving our town by sacrificing you. I see now that I was just protecting my own fear." Sophia looked at the woman who had been her mother and felt a pang of sorrow for them both. You can't protect someone by breaking them, Clara. I know. A tear traced a path down Clara's cheek. I don't expect your forgiveness. I wanted you to know that I am proud of the person you are, the person you always were, even when I was too blind to see it. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an acknowledgement, a first step. After Clara left, Sophia found a single handwritten note had been slipped under her door. It was from Daniel. The writing was his, but the tone was different, stripped of its arrogance. Sophia, the enhancements have worn off. The clarity that remains is uncomfortable. You were right about everything. I was a coward, hiding behind a title I didn't deserve. I am stepping down from active leadership at Thorn Industries to focus on rebuilding, myself primarily. I cannot undo what I did, but I am trying, for the first time, to become a man who might have been worthy of the connection the world offered him. Perhaps, in time, we might speak. Daniel. Sophia folded the note and placed it in a drawer. She felt the ghost of their connection, not as a painful wound, but as a closed chapter. The future was too bright to be haunted by the past. She walked back to her window. The city was no longer a fortress to be stormed, but a landscape of possibility. She was Sophia Rutherford, heir to a legacy of vision, architect of her own destiny. She had been rejected, betrayed, and cornered. And from that corner, she had not just fought her way out, she had built a new world. And in a society that had tried so hard to destroy her, that was the greatest victory of all.